has been so improbable, the impossible has happened. This one by Mattingly. Oh, hang on to the roof. Goodbye, home run. Done Mattingly. Tucker waits one. Deep left field. Down the line. That ball is out of here. Out of here.
Welcome back to another episode of Tablesetters, covering all things Major League Baseball. As always, I'm Steve, joined my tag team partner, Devin. What's up, dude?
What's going on, dude? Spring is in the air. Not officially spring yet, but spring training game's on. I was watching my Metsies last night, or not last night, yesterday. Juan Soto off with a bang. Have you taken in any of the spring training games so far?
I have, dude. It's like, as we said before, it's a tease for the real action, but an appetizer. I like seeing the real uniforms out there and seeing baseball being played, but it is a tease, dude. I can't wait to get into. You mentioned Juan Soto and all the exciting stuff, but today, no warming up in the bullpen. We're joined by a special guest, Marquee Sports Network studio host, Cole Wright, a Chicago area native and a lifelong Cubs fan. He's been a key part of the Cubs' lives since Marquee's launch back in 2020, providing pregame and postgame coverage throughout the season. Before joining Marquee, Cole worked with the NFL Network, ESPN, Fox Sports 1, NESN, and Sportsnet LA, covering a range of sports at the national level. His return to Chicago to cover the Cubs brings his career full circle. As a fan of the team, we appreciate him taking the time to join us today. Welcome, Cole.
Hey, thanks, Steve. Devin, appreciate the time, man. Glad to be a part of the show today, man. How you guys doing?
Doing well, man. I'm very, very happy to talk. And there's been a lot of conversation about wanting to talk about the Cubs. We do cover the league at large, and the Cubs are one team we've been touching upon, but haven't really dove into it. And Devin, you run the Twitter machine over there. There's been a lot of conversation about wanting the Cubs coverage on here.
Yeah, I mean, there seems to be a Cubs story every day for the last month or so, or really more than that, ever since the Kyle Tucker stuff got going on. So, we've now, I think, we've had 18 specific or team-specific episodes on here, and the Cubs are one that a lot of people have been calling for. So we're happy to get one going tonight.
Absolutely. Glad to be here and talk all things Cubs. Just got back from Mesa just the other day. So, there's a lot of things that piqued my interest, and I'm watching a few of these games over the last few days. Like, this isn't a team that right off the rip is going to get you with power. They're going to get you by playing an old school style of baseball, which sounds crazy because I know nobody plays that anymore. But even though I know that these aren't necessarily all going to be the regulars that we're going to see throughout the 162 game stretch, guys going out there and getting hits, playing a little station to station baseball is a refreshing sight to see. And when you sprinkle in a guy like Michael Busch, who's getting doubles and base knocks, in addition to some of these, these auxiliary players, I like what I see so far.
And we mentioned the tease of spring training. You were out there in Mesa. The Cubs are set to open the 2025 season in Tokyo against the reigning World Series champion Dodgers, with Shohei Ohtani, Seiya Suzuki, and several prominent players returning to their home country. How significant do you think this is, Cole, for the event, not only for the Cubs brand, but for MLB's international presence and reputation?
I think it's big. I mean, just take a look at just the growing number of players that come from Japan to play in Major League Baseball. And I know it's the cream of the crop from the NPB over there. However, the more you can go over there and play over there, that's attracting those players. And, even though you're going to be playing 2 exhibition games, the Cubs will be, ahead of their matchups with the Dodgers. I just think that, like you said, it increases the Major League brand. It increases the Cubs brand. The Dodgers being over there with so many Japanese superstars, especially part of the rotation. I mean, the fingerprints that they'll be able to put on the Japanese landscape of baseball is going to be unbelievable. So just being able to grow the game everywhere, I think that's fantastic. I have an idea where I think that they should play, like, say, the Cubs and the Braves, they should play at LSU Tiger Stadium. At the Alec Box Stadium, you can go there, or you can go play a big time game at Wake Forest. So people who don't normally get a chance to see, top flight baseball, where it's tough for them to travel, they can go to their, big time college stadium and go check that out and go see a game like that. I mean, that would also be able to grow the game stateside.
I love that idea. I mean, they're adding more and more of these special games. And honestly, I think they've hit it out of the park so far. I know they'll be at Bristol later in the year with the Reds and the Braves, which will be, quite a sight to see. I'm curious what you think about the ESPN MLB separation that is apparently coming. Do you think this leaves a giant hole? Are you concerned at all that it could hurt viewership nationally, or you're excited for the possibilities of how they could replace it?
I mean, anytime you see, a rights deal or anything going in not the right direction where you want it to go, and potentially taking viewers away from the game that we love, never an ideal situation. However, I feel like baseball is in a pretty good place. There's a lot of new stars and a lot of fresh faces that are helping drive the engine. So I have a pretty high level of confidence that they're going to be able to get a deal done. I mean, it's clearly above my pay grade, and I'm not privy to any of that information. Nobody invites me to any of those meetings, but I think that everything's going to get worked out. I mean, the one thing that you really look at is when you look at the specific sport-specific networks, MLB Network, I mean, they do the best job head and shoulders above the rest. I mean, they no disrespect to any of the other networks, but MLB Network destroys all of them. So, I feel like they'll do a good job of being able to allocate some of those games and, being able to get the right eyes on those contests. And I think it's just, right around the corner. We still have some time. The Cubs and Dodgers kicking things off in Japan. That's going to be a little bit of a buffer. That's clearly a major league game, but I just think that with the time frame ahead of the campaign getting kicked off, I think baseball, like I said, is in a good position. I think they'll be all right.
So as far as your consumption of sports in general, we're seeing a reshuffling of how people consume it. It's digital. I was just talking with Devin before we got on here about Major League Soccer and how it's all based on Apple TV without any blackouts in mind. And I know, some of the bad situations that happened with Bally Sports and going bankrupt and some of these teams left with figuring out what's next. The silver lining of that is this a la carte model where you be able to just watch the team that you want to watch. Your thoughts on that? Because Devin and I can't figure out where it's going. And I mean, 10, 15 years down the line, it feels like the cord cutting is going to be the norm going forward.
Well, I mean, you've seen so many people that do cut the cord, and then they're realizing once they do the math, it's like, okay, I've got this streaming service, that streaming service, this one as well. And I'm paying more than I was originally paying for cable. Like, that's the whole reason why people get rid of it. And now it's like, you'll even get, even if it's just a streaming service to go watch a game one time as like a promotional offer, you'll go back and you're like, oh man, I forgot to cancel that. And the bills just stack up. And I mean, it happens to everybody. I'm sure someone has a streaming service that they don't really want to still be paying for, but they are. So whether or not people go back to cable, whether they do follow that a la carte model, I feel like that's dependent on, whoever wants to consume those games. And there are so many different ways to be able to check out your favorite team. So that's the best part of it. I mean, whether you have the MLB app, the at-bat app, or, you have a streaming app like MarqueeSportsNetwork.com. So whichever way you're able to get these games and digest them, that's all that really matters. As long as you can still go out there and see your favorite player, no matter where you're at, in the country, that's the best of both worlds.
So shifting the conversation towards the Cubs on the field this season, after finishing with 83 wins last season, they missed the postseason just narrowly. They had a lot of exciting moments, some exciting players. What do you think must shift for the Cubs to make that next leap and secure a place in October with an NL Central division that's wide open, it seems?
I feel like you have to win those close games, and the ability to, or inability to, lock things down in those close games last year, if it rested on the shoulders of the bullpen. And I feel like they made a whole lot of repairs to that bullpen. When you take a look at Ryan Presley, Eli Morgan, just to name a few guys that are coming over even to the starting rotation, Colin Ray, it's a fortified pitching staff, and that's what you want to see. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Cubs have 12 to 13 new faces on this roster, and that's a big turnover. I mean, just watching the games and seeing not the younger guys who are wearing numbers in the 90s, but guys who will look to make an impact. Whether or not it's a guy like Travis Jankowski or Justin Turner, guys who have been there before and they've won before, and they know how to get it done, and they know how to be role players in certain situations. So this is a team that I think could make a lot of noise. They're predicted. Pacoda says they're a 91 win team. I mean, for me, there's times where I really agree with Pacoda. There's times where I'm like, well, why are we even referencing this? So I feel like when you can cherry pick a stat like 91 wins, that's not too bad. If I'm not mistaken, I think 2018 was the last 90 plus win season for the Cubs. So for them to be able to jump back in that, if you can try to nail down 90 plus wins and let everything else fall by the wayside, then you'll be doing pretty good. And if you don't make the postseason with 90 or more wins, then I think it's back to the drawing board. But that's the goal, to win 90 or more games and then find out where everything's going to rest once the postseason rolls around.
So speaking of bringing all those new faces in, the architect of that is General Manager Jed Hoyer, who I feel like he's been under some pressure here recently. Do you think particularly the Kyle Tucker acquisition, but all the other things around it that you mentioned as well, whether it be Justin Turner or Colin Ray or Ryan Presley, do you think enough has been done to solidify his future, Jed Hoyer's future in Chicago for a little bit longer term?
I think if you ask Jed, he would say, winning is the end all be all. And right now, being able to 83 wins the last 2 seasons is that good? It's where you want to be, but where you really want to be is the postseason. So I think, and one thing that you have to consider is that, last year things didn't go as exactly as you planned it. What happened? Injuries. And you have to bake injuries into every single season. But some of the injuries were at inopportune times, and that's the same for all teams. However, when you look at Cody Bellinger, when he gets banged up, that's not when you want it to happen. Even if you go back 2 years ago, Jamer Candelario, a huge acquisition at the deadline, he was cooking. He gets hurt. Albert Alzolay was, at that point, he was a cemented closer, and he was that guy. He had that the nice little fist pump coming through and everything. He goes down, and then September kind of turned into, I wouldn't necessarily say a shambles, but September is when that team fell apart, and a team that played so well and was in so many ball games 2 seasons ago, that was the injury bug that got him. And last year, not necessarily the injury bug, but guys getting hurt. And you combine that with just the fact of the bullpen not being able to hammer things down towards the back end of games. 28 one-run losses. You can't do that. You have to win those close ones. And like I've said it a million times before, even if you cut that in half and give 3 or 4 back to the loss side, that's a whole handful of extra wins that could put you in postseason contention. Even if 10 of those, you're a 93-win team at that point. So you have to win those close ball games, and you have to beat the teams that you're supposed to beat, and then you have to be able to go out and beat the teams like the Dodgers. And the Cubs had a winning record against the Dodgers last season. They played to their competition, it seems like. When they played the strong teams, they really went out there and put that best foot forward. However, there were times when you'd see them play down to their competition, and it's like, why is this team losing to this team? You could fill in the blank with whatever team was sub 500. There were times that that they shouldn't have lost that game to that team, and that's what happened. So you have to turn that around. That needs to be fixed if you want to be sipping from that playoff cup this season.
When it comes to Tucker, it almost feels like very similar to the Yankees with Juan Soto last year, and we see how that ended up. Like the clock starts ticking right away. There's all this excitement, but the clock starts ticking right away. There's a situation where he could only end up being in Chicago for 1 year. What is the fans feeling around that scenario? Is it, in their minds, is it a failure if he gets away after this year? Let's say even they make the playoffs, don't win the World Series, and Tucker leaves during the offseason. How do you feel that's going to be seen by fans of the team?
Well, I think it's all dependent on, what the circumstances, if he were to go elsewhere. I think that's dependent on the fans' reaction. If he goes somewhere and someone pays him $700 million, I don't think there'd be as much as Cubs fans already love Kyle Tucker, that's a crazy deal. And I feel like, Devin, you're a Mets fan, and your boy Juan Soto and Steve Cohen, they upended everything. And no disrespect to Juan Soto, but at what point in the world does anyone think that he's more valuable of a player than Shohei Ohtani? Right. I don't know anybody. If your baseball credentials need to be revoked if you think that Juan Soto is bringing more to a baseball diamond than Shohei Ohtani. And I feel like there's other players who have very similar numbers. They might not walk as much as Juan Soto, but their offensive numbers are right there. If you're a 280, 25 home run a season dude, and that's what you put up, now guess what? If you're a Vlad Jr., if you're someone that's cut from that cloth, now you think, hey, guess what? I'm worth $600 million plus too. And I feel like that the market's been shifted, and I feel like it's good for the players. And if you have the right agent, but I don't necessarily feel that's the best for the competitive balance of baseball. And I know that maybe that's not the proper wording, because there is a competitive balance tax and all these things that factor into the equation. But I just feel like it's thrown things off. And I don't know. Like, I just feel like there's been this myth perpetuated that Juan Soto is the greatest player ever. And like, once again, no disrespect to Juan Soto, he's supremely talented. But I feel like if you go back and look at the starting lineups for the 1999 All-Star game, every one of those dudes could get paid $700 million for the most part.
Yeah.
It's like, are you kidding me with that? Like, yeah, dude's batting like 363 and it's in the middle of July. And it's like, I remember that when Soto got traded from the Nats to the Padres, we were at the Field of Dreams game, and I was sitting by, George Foster was there, Tim Raines was there, Billy Williams was there, Fergie Jenkins, just a whole bunch of Dave Concepcion, a Hall of Fame player. And I was sitting literally like 5 to 6 feet away from these cats. And I wanted to be like, hey guys, remember when you were in the middle of July, when you were hitting 246 and people were saying that you were the best player in the world? And I feel like if I would have said that, they all would have turned around and looked at me crazy like, and then started laughing. But that wasn't the case. But that was the case when people put this label on Juan Soto. And I know that his 19 to 25 seasons are comparable to Mickey Mantle, and they're fantastic. And I hope he continues to set the baseball world on fire. But I also feel like there's been such a value that's been placed on the walk. And don't get me wrong, walks are important. But it's like, if you go back and walk and on base percentage, leads to OPS when you combine everything together, but that wasn't a driving force 25 years ago. Was it a stat that people peered in on every once in a while? Yeah, and maybe I'm the old dude in the barbershop dressed like The Rock with a fanny pack and a turtleneck. But I like hits. I like dudes that get hits, man. Like, if I have cats on base, guess what? If I have a runner on second base and he's a speedy dude, guess what's not going to drive him in? A walk. Like, is that a great piece of baseball by being able to see more pitches and drive up the count on that pitcher? Absolutely. But I don't necessarily know if I'm paying dudes astronomical sums of money because they walk a lot. Like, if you don't bat over 300, but you walk a lot, like that to me does not offset things. But most people don't really ask my baseball opinion when it comes to some of those numbers anyway. So I guess I'm just, like I said, the old guy in the club, man.
No, I mean, you used the right word when you use the word upended. I agree. As a Met fan, I'm ecstatic to have him.
Yeah.
Steve Cohen needed to finally get one of those wins with the big player. Like, he's signed some players, he's throwing money around, but like, he's fallen short on the big player. For Soto, it seemed like the perfect storm where this had been building over the years. And the age thing you mentioned is probably the number one appeal. And he also had every single big market team pretty much in on him, where it just got to be this crazy bidding war. Shohei, I think everyone almost knew he was going to LA. Like, I think that was kind of known. I know there was the Toronto rumors and things like that, but not as many teams were in. But upended is the right word to get back to that, because you mentioned Tucker and whatever he'll be looking for, who knows, after the Soto contract. I mean, that's the whole reason Houston moved him out of nowhere. They had no intention on doing that before Soto signed, and then saw those numbers and said, well, we can't even think about being in on this for Tucker next year. Vladdy, I think about him a lot. I don't see any world where someone pays him $400-500 million as a first baseman.
A lot of money, man.
I wouldn't be surprised if some of these guys are very disappointed next year, because ownership around the league is probably going to try to reset a little bit to kind of get back to the real world. But I want to, before we get too far away from the Cubs, just to ask about, we mentioned Tucker, we mentioned Cody Bellinger leaving. How do you see the outfield situation, since we're talking about those two guys? How do you see that coming for Chicago this year?
I like it a lot, man. I mean, what's not to like? I mean, you have a 3-time Gold Glover in left in Ian Happ. I mean, I feel like his average numbers are going to pick up. He's going to have a higher batting average, and last year was 26, 27 home runs, or I know 25 plus. Right now the number off the top eludes me, but he's that guy who can go out there and he can hit 280 with 25 to 30 home runs. He can drive in runs. He can steal bases. You have Kyle Tucker. I mean, he's average right at 30 home runs over the last 3 seasons. So he's also a dude who's going to put a charge in it and play Gold Glove defense. I mean, that's one thing that he's going to bring to right field at Wrigley Field. Like Cody Bellinger, was he a Gold Glove caliber outfielder? Absolutely. Whether you put him in right, you put him in center, you can also throw him at first, and he's going to go out there and pick it for you and make sure it doesn't hit the ground. Kyle Tucker, I think that's what he does, though. He's a right fielder. He's not a jack of all trades. That's where he plays. Unless it's World Baseball Classic and they got to throw him in left, there's no need for that. And when you have quite possibly the rangiest center fielder in all the game, I mean, there might be certain fan bases who'd like to debate, But when I get to watch Pete Crow Armstrong, you know, up close and personal, and we get to do defensive demos, like, I mean, this dude is electric. So, I mean, he's going to cover so much ground. And I mean, that somewhat curtails the ground that Tuck and Hap have to cover. So that's a good thing, because, you know, their Gold Glove skill set is going to be able to shine through that much more. And I feel like it's going to allow Pete to showcase his defensive prowess, man, because this is a dude who's on the cusp. And if you can look at that outfield and say, okay, Gold Glove, Gold Glove, Gold Glove. Yeah. And then you look at the infield, you know, Michael Busch in the second half at first base, he played first base like a Gold Glove first baseman. And, you know, it almost seems as if a lot of failed third basemen turn into really, really good first basemen. And I think that's what we saw during the back half of the campaign last year. So with Nico, a Gold Glover at second base, Dansby Swanson, you know, pretty much a perennial Gold Glover at shortstop. And, you know, whoever's at third, the question mark right now remains. Who will it be? Will it be Matt Shaw? Will it be Justin Turner? Who's it going to be over there, you know, to hold things down until the time being? But I'm going to be completely honest with you guys. Sight unseen, if I were a scout walking into Cubs camp and then seeing some of the games that I've seen so far, I'm a big fan of Gage Workman, man. Like, this dude, I mean, first of all, he looks a little out of place at third base because he's 6'4", every bit of it, and pretty slender. And he looks like he should be a first baseman or an outfielder. But then when you watch him move, man, like, I mean, this cat is very fluid. You know, we saw him in the few early goings, turn some double plays. He's been putting a lot of pop on the ball. We saw him go bridge. He also stayed on one and shot one opposite field. And the one thing that I really like about his game is that he's got speed, man. This dude's stolen 30-plus bases in the minors the last 2 years in a row. And I feel like if his game can translate, and if still Shaw's dealing with an oblique, I feel like it's not really going to be that big of an issue. But just in case, you never know. You still, I mean, everything is a question mark until it's all systems go. You know, Nico's just starting to throw. He's starting to get long toss under his belt right now. So I feel like having a dude like Gage Workman that you were able to pick up in that Rule 5 from Detroit, I feel like all that is a feather in the cap of the Cubs right now. And he's one guy who's certainly piqued the interest of me.
So you mentioned third base being a position of instability really since Chris Bryant's departure, and Matt Shaw emerging. You mentioned him by name and some of the stuff he's dealing with, but a top prospect. And the addition of Justin Turner, you mentioned his veteran presence, bringing a wealth of experience in big games. Do you see that being Justin Turner's job to lose going into opening day, of just like, we want to have a guy in there? Or is this Matt Shaw's rapid development through the minor leagues? This is going to be his job. It's going to be interesting to watch.
Well, I mean, you know, there's Nicky Lopez, there's John Birdie there also, who are able to hold things down defensively. So I don't think, looking at the numbers, game by game numbers from a season ago for Justin Turner, if he's going to see a whole bunch of time at third base, or if he's just going to be able to spell cats like, okay, Seiya, you need a day off at DH, cool. Michael Busch, you need a day off at first. All right, Justin Turner, he's there to help guys shuffle around. And I feel like maybe Michael Busch will play a game at third. I mean, maybe I'm completely off base, but who knows, just in case, you know. So that's why Justin Turner has been brought on, not just for that, but he's been brought on for that winning pedigree. I mean, this dude knows how to win. I mean, like you said before we got started, I used to work at SNLA, Sportsnet Los Angeles, and I covered the Dodgers. I covered Justin Turner as a Los Angeles Dodger, so I know what he brings to the table as far as winning is concerned. I've seen him in a clubhouse, and I know how he operates, and he's that kind of dude that you want in your clubhouse. You know, he's going to be the guy who, you know, that picks guys up and gives them words of advice. And I just feel like he's the kind of player that everybody needs in the clubhouse. And, you know, for the Cubs to actually have that glue guy now, whether or not he sees a whole bunch of burn out there on the field, and who knows where he's going to fit in, but hopefully he's going to be the biggest piece of the puzzle in that clubhouse.
Another idea at third base as of a couple weeks ago was bringing Alex Bregman in. The Cubs were one of the last suitors left. There was kind of obviously he went to Boston. He took the biggest deal there as far as annual money. There was kind of this bombshell dropped afterward. Jed Hoyer basically admitting that ownership, Tom Ricketts, doesn't really want to include deferred money in these contract offers anymore. The Cubs are still paying guys like John Lester and Jason Hayward deferred money. Just give us your thoughts on that. And a two-part question, really. What do you think about the deferred money situation and those comments? And then the second thing is, do you think the ceiling of this team would have been way higher with Alex Bregman on the team?
I mean, he's going to make any team better. I mean, that's That's a given. But I honestly think that Alex Bregman didn't just take the most money. He went with the ballpark that suits his game the best.
Yeah.
I mean, I've taken batting practice in Fenway Park. I've also taken batting practice in Wrigley Field. And when I got done taking BP at Fenway, there were kids that were asking me if I played for the Red Sox. It hurt me in my soul because I had to tell them with a heavy heart that no, young man, I do not play for the Red Sox. That was a metal bat. And this is also a few years ago, but taking BP in Wrigley, it's not the easiest. Like, I mean, to get it out of there, I mean, you have to get not just get under it, but you have to get really behind it. And I'm not saying that Alex Bregman couldn't do that, but he makes every team better. And I mean, I don't know. I'm like the financials. That's not really what I dig into. But I feel like if you're wanting to be the owner of a team and the ownership group, you don't want to necessarily saddle yourself with some of these long-term finances down the road. And I feel like the Dodgers, maybe what they're going to do is maybe their ownership group before they have to start paying all these cats, maybe they'll sell and saddle the new ownership group with some of these bills and say, hey, guess what? Like, we did what we were able to do. We've elevated this team to this point. So now it's your turn to pay this. So, that's a business side that, I don't really involve myself with, and when it comes to my family tree, like my brother's the investment banker. So I let him do with that. So because if that was the case with me, there'd be a lot of upset people at my front doorstep. Like, yo, man, you put the decimal point in the wrong place. What's going on, bozo? I'm like, hey, I know how to talk about sports and I know how to talk about sports. So that's pretty much where I leave it.
Do you see the other teams, before we move on from the deferred money, with the Dodgers are doing? There's a competitive nature of these different franchises, not just on the field, but off the field, finding loopholes. And I guess maybe it is not even a loophole what the Dodgers are. What do you see that evening out for other teams where the Dodgers will no longer have that advantage?
I mean, we'll see. I mean, everyone can do it, but not a lot of people seem to be doing it. It just, maybe I feel like that guys will take less and say, hey, you know what? I'll just take more. Maybe it's kind of like the deferment is almost like a sunshine tax. Like these dudes would be like, hey, I'll go play there and deal with the warmer weather and not have to deal with other things that may come into play. But I mean, I don't know if other teams wanted to do it. I guess they all could. I mean, there's no rule against it. I mean, we saw Commissioner Manfred said that it's good for baseball right now. I mean, this is just a few days ago. So, I mean, clearly other squads can jump in on the fun if they want to. So, I mean, we'll see how it all goes down. I mean, will the Dodgers continue to do that? If they're able to win another World Series, I don't see why they wouldn't. But I mean, it does. It kind of stinks when you see them, pick up a guy like Tanner Scott, for what was it, 3 years, $70 million, something of that nature, and then okay, so Kirby Yates, he's going to be cool. Oh, they picked up Kirby Yates for almost the same price. Don't they have like 16 closers right now? Like, do they need all those dudes? I mean, it's almost like the rich kid. Have you guys seen 8-Bit Christmas?
No,
I have not.
Well, I think once Christmas time rolls around, I suggest you watch it. It's about this kid who's right about my age, who lives in the Chicagoland area, and he wants a Nintendo for Christmas. And there's one kid in his neighborhood who has a Nintendo, and he's like the rich kid, and like he picks the people that can come in and play every day. Like, the Dodgers right now are the rich kid they're buying up every toy. It's like, I want to get every toy so none other kids can play with it. Like, I guess if you can do it, cool, but like it kind of offsets things, like with Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates both going off the market just like that at almost identical deals. It's a head scratcher. Like, just you want to leave some toys for the other kids to play with.
So we did talk about Matt Shaw a little bit, emerging at third base. The Cubs also have many other big-time prospects. They currently lead the NL with 7 players ranked in MLB's top 100. How does the front office evaluate and prioritize which of these high-level potentials, like Kevin Alcantara, Cade Horton, Moises Ballesteros, Owen Caissie? I feel like the fact that Cam Smith was expendable, I wouldn't even say that, number 73 overall, it's because they have an embarrassment of riches ready to come up eventually when the time comes.
Yeah, we spoke about it before. We've talked with guys, just that are in the know. How long will they wait to potentially bring some of these cats up or use them as currency? Because we all know that that's really what some of these prospects are. They're baseball currency. If they're not going to be impactful with your squad, if you have these guys who are so high up, why not use them for something to better your team? I mean, if you can go out and get, a stopgap for third base, and this isn't for the Cubs, this is just for any squad. If you have a competent minor league and farm system, why not use some of these young guys? You pair them with, a guy that's already on your squad that maybe you did a little wheeling and dealing for, and then before you know it, you're in business and you have, some of the positions filled that you need. So that's the question. Will these guys turn into big leaguers, or will they be used as baseball currency? And that's a big question. The season's still not here yet. So are there still moves to be made? Potentially. I mean, we've seen it happen before, right before the season gets underway. So there's some guys who have a lot of potential, like Kevin Alcantara, like you said, he's been out there getting knocks. The Jaguar, I don't know if you've seen this cat in person, but I mean, he's every bit of 6'6". He can run, he can swing it. He's got a crazy arm. So, will he be an impact player for this 2025 Cubs installment? We'll see. Or will he be, one of the guys who helps the Cubs farm system continue to flourish? But the one thing is, you don't want to leave guys down there too long and have them kind of waste away before they're called up to your big squad. And this goes for every team. You want them to be able to find their spot. I mean, we saw with Alexander Canario, he just was DFA'd the other day, to make room for Justin Turner. And Canario has shown tons of promise. He led the entire organization, I think it was 3 seasons ago, in home runs. I mean, he had 37 home runs and Matt Mervis had 36. And these are two guys who, I mean, if you would have, played your cards and dealt them somewhere else, who knows what could have happened. But that's the problem with all highly talented prospects. Like, will they have enough? Will there be somebody blocking them? Will there be a log jam for their progression to the show? Or will they find that place where they're on the hook on via a trade or something else? So we'll see. There's still a lot of days before the season starts. I know fewer days rather for the Cubs, because they're going to lace them up versus the Dodgers in Japan. But I still think there could be a move or two that might have people being like, oh, okay, like watch out. Like there could be a reason why Pacoda has the Cubs at 91 wins.
Yeah, I think the extreme side of the precautionary stuff you're talking about is the Baltimore Orioles, and watching what they're doing, not making room for players and being resistant to trading the prospects. And then when they move a prospect, it feels like it's not for an influential player that it's not going to help them at the deadline. With Trevor Rogers, we saw they're frustrating to watch. I'm a Yankee fan, but just watch what the Baltimore Orioles were doing, the excitement that was building over in Camden. It's frustrating to watch them hoard these prospects, and all the stuff that's going on there. It feels like their window is rapidly closing, which is crazy to say because they had so much talent ready to roll. And I don't know. I would hate for any other team to model themselves after what the Orioles are doing. I may be completely wrong now. Like, the Orioles may come out and shock the world and they did everything right, but looking at what they did, they got worse this year. And that's sad because this team is ready to be a contender for the next 10, 15 years.
Yeah, I feel like, Steve, when you look at just the general landscape of baseball, I feel like as baseball fans, none of us really want the bad teams to be that bad. Like, being here in Chicago, a lifelong Cubs fan, there was a time where I was a huge Frank Thomas fan. I played baseball my whole life. I played first base. So how could you not be a fan of Frank Thomas? So when you sit there and look across on the South Side and you see how bad the White Sox are, nobody wants that. Nobody wants that smudge on the city of Chicago. Like, I would love for the crosstown rivalry to be, it could go either way every single year. You don't want to see a lopsided battle. And for baseball in the city, win, lose, or draw, whatever team you're a fan of, you want success for every team. You want the White Sox to be good, the Cubs to be good, the Bulls, the Bears, everybody. You want every single squad in the city to be good. And, for the competitive nature of most Chicagoans, I just feel like it's just better when every team is good. So you never want to see just cats just slopping it up. So, good baseball is what you want to see. And, whether it's the Baltimore Orioles or the Chicago White Sox or the Oakland A's for that matter, you just want to see an elevated product out there on the field each and every single time you tune in.
I think everybody's scared to be the James Shield deal. Like, you trade for James Shields at the deadline, it winds up being Fernando Tatis Jr. on the other side. But for all those other deals that happened, there are prospects that don't work out. You mentioned, like, the maturation of prospects doesn't always come to fruition, and it is a gamble, no doubt about it. And it has a lot to do with the circumstance and the environment they're in for development. It's not just, oh, you guys made a bad decision. So teams have to go out there like the Orioles. I am imposing them. Go out there and use it as currency. Like you said, Cole, I thought it was perfectly put. These players can be currency. You don't have room for everybody to play. There's not positions for every one of these players. They have to be spent. to build your team long term.
You can't, and you have to also, weigh in how many options does this guy still have, and what do we do with him before we break camp? Does he come with us? Do we send him down? Where does he start the season? There's 30 teams, and there's 30 general managers or presidents of baseball operations, whatever the title has been given to a lot of these different cats that run teams, and everyone has a shelf life. It doesn't matter what team you're on. If you're managing the Chattanooga, the general manager of the Chattanooga Lookouts, like everyone has a shelf life. So I think winning right now is important for everybody. It just doesn't matter for one team or another. And I think the general nature of everybody who's in those positions, what do they want to do? They've gotten there because they've done a whole lot of winning. It's not like they found them at the circus behind the elephants with the shovel and like, hey, let's make this guy a GM. Like, no, they've done a lot of winning consistently in life, and that's not to disrespect the circus shovelers behind the elephants. But I just don't. I think that whoever is in those positions, they want to win. They've always done a lot of winning. They come from a tradition of counting victories. So I think 30 teams, 30 guys that run the squads, everyone wants to win this season, and that's the best part of the campaign getting underway. Everyone's 0-0. And I know it can go south real quick for some squads, but every fan base has some hope at the beginning of the season, right?
I mean, Steve, you mentioned the Tatis Shields deal, and that immediately made me think of a Mets trade with the Cubs a few years ago. We acquired Javi Baez at the deadline and gave up the guy you mentioned before, Cole, Pete Crow Armstrong, which still hurts and stings a little bit because obviously the Baez thing didn't work out too well. But actually, this was not the question I was originally going to plan on asking you right here, but it's just coming to my mind. Anthony Rizzo, and Steve, you're a Yankee fan, so you've watched him for years. Cole, obviously, as a Cubs fan, I mean, the best years of Anthony Rizzo. Are you can both chime in here, surprised? Like, I think of Justin Turner being this clubhouse guy and getting a deal almost just for that. Are you surprised to see Anthony Rizzo with no job right now?
Weren't there rumblings? Cleveland? Did he not get picked up by Cleveland?
If he did, I missed it.
I thought there were rumblings there, but either way, like for him, I feel like to be kind of just out there. I feel like the grit and determination of an Anthony Rizzo, like we saw last season with he had a busted paw, man. He's out there in the World Series just trying to get knocks, and it's a valiant effort. But I don't know. I feel like that when the gas runs out on a dude, I feel like people are off of him, and unfortunately, hopefully that's not the case for Anthony Rizzo before this year gets underway or before the season concludes. Hopefully he'll be on somebody's team. But I just think that, especially at first base, that's a tough one to latch on because normally first base, they have a game plan there. It's not like he doesn't play a rover position. He's not a guy who's scrappy and can play a whole bunch of spots. Like Anthony Rizzo can play first base and DH. I mean, there's nowhere else. It's not like you're going to be like, hey, Tony Two Chains, we're going to need you in center field today just because it's not going down. So I feel like, you're limited when you're a player like that. And it's not to take anything away from, your game and what you were once upon a time, but when there's a limited spot for you on that field and there's only so many places you can be put in a lineup, I feel like it handcuffs your skipper. So, for Anthony Rizzo, whatever team he is on, he's going to be a little older. He's going to have a lot less pop than whoever they really have at first base. So that's a conundrum that you run into. And then with Justin Turner, he can play first, he can play third, he can DH. I feel like he can do just a little bit more than Anthony Rizzo. And I mean, at their best, were they pretty much equal players? I would go out on a limb and say absolutely yes. But in the later stages of their career, I would have to say that Justin Turner might be the better of the two.
Yeah, I agree with that as well as the Yankee fan on perspective. I mean, once the post-concussion syndrome stuff went down, it feels like he wasn't the same player. Yeah. And like Cole said, sometimes the clock just runs out, the sand runs through the hourglass, and it's over. I know he's 35, but looking at him on the field and everything he was battling through, it might just be time. And unfortunately, like that's the case sometimes. And I think Anthony Rizzo's career would be looked upon very fondly. I mean, keeping in Cubs centric, he's part of that 2016 World Series team for a long time. Magical moments. I would love to see a reunion of some sorts. I'm not saying, working as a coach on the team, but as an ambassador coming back and just appreciating a one-day contract situation. Anthony Rizzo deserves his love at Wrigley.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, there's Statue Row. If you guys have never been to Wrigley Field and Gallagher Way, right out in front, there's Statue Row with, all the statues of all the legends. I think that quite possibly the next statue could be, all the guys, with the jubilant response after the World Series when they were winning and everyone was being hoisted up. I think that could be the very next one. So Anthony Rizzo will definitely probably, but I think if you had to go out on a limb and you had to, go out with FanDuel or DraftKings or Circus Sports and you had to put down the odds, I think Anthony Rizzo will be back with the Cubs in some way, shape, form, or fashion, whether it's, him being a Hall of Famer, him being a part of a collective statue, a number retirement, and no matter what it is, I think he will be back. I feel like his fingerprints, they're too noticeable on the Cubs franchise. I mean, to end that 108-year drought. I mean, I remember where I was at. I mean, I don't know if you guys remember. I don't even know if you're old enough to remember. It seems like time flies, but for me, it was a very special moment. So Anthony Rizzo is definitely going to have a place in Cubs history.
It's crazy to think, like, as 2016, it's crazy to think it seemed like they left so quickly, that core, whether it be Rizzo or Schwarber or Chris Bryant or Javi Baez, even, like, it just felt like they were going to be there forever after such a big win, and then they were gone, like, in the blink of an eye, seemingly. But let's get back to the current squad. The rotation we haven't talked about very much yet. Very nice at the top, Imanaga and Justin Steele, hopefully both healthy years. Obviously, Steele had some injury issues in the beginning of the year last year. That was kind of unfortunate. Matthew Boyd is a newcomer here. Jameson Tyone, another guy you're hoping for good health. The number 5 spot seems to be at least a little bit in question. Who do you see taking that position before the season starts?
Well, I mean, there's a number of dudes. It could be Colin Ray. I mean, it could be a guy like Jordan Wicks. I mean, Javier Assad. We've seen all these guys, fill that role, and I just feel like it's who's pitching the best right now. I mean, I'm not Craig Counsell, and I don't make out any rotation or I fill out any lineup cards, but I feel like you have to go with the hot hand. Whose stuff looks the best? Could it be Ben Brown? I mean, Ben Brown's stuff is dirty, man. Like, let's be honest, but he's also a guy who can ride both buses. He can start for you. He can relieve. I mean, if need be, he could close. But I feel like whether it's Ryan Presley or Porter Hodge right now in that closer role, I feel like some of these bases are covered, and that's the good thing heading into the season, because I feel like last year, some of those question marks were question marks. And Hector Neris, would he do whatever was asked of him last year? Yes. Is Hector Neris a closer? No. It's at one point, and he just kept getting bumped up and bruised up. And my dad sent me a message, and I called him, and he's like, I tell you what, man, Hector Neris is going to need a police escort out of Wrigley tonight. And it's just, I mean, and when you hear him speak after the game, it's like he's ready to do whatever it takes to win. And did he necessarily have all the gas in the tank? No, but you have to admire a dude who's always willing to do whatever it takes. So, I just feel like this year the bases are covered. There's better. I can't necessarily say better dudes in better positions to succeed, but I just feel like that's kind of what has happened this year. You've seen the front office go there and make some of these adjustments that needed to be made, and you have that mix of velocity. Daniel Palencia, we saw him almost 102 the other day. Porter Hodge, he throws hard. Luke Little, I feel like is on the mend. He's a guy who, if he's doing everything that needs to be done, and he's, his balance points, if he's able to hit all those, then he's going to be a problem as well. A 6'8" lefty. I mean, there's just a lot of potential. Jack Neely's 6'8". I mean, you just have a bunch of dudes, a lot of size, velo mixed with some finesse, and that's a good problem to have. So, when it comes to that fifth starter, there's a lot of question marks, but they're good question marks, not like, right, all right, well, who are we going to throw in? Like, that no one seems to be up to the task. No, it's a different scenario where there could be one of 4 dudes who fill in that fifth spot, but they're all very serviceable. And the luxury that you have when those guys could fill that fifth starter role, if you have 3 or 4 cats, that means your long relief is going to look a little bit better. So if they're not able to go, 5, 6 innings, because nobody goes 7 or 8 innings for the most part anymore, you're able to have those dudes who can come out and chew up 3 or 4 frames in the middle and then be that bridge to the 8th and 9th innings. So I think it's a good situation to be in, and to be able to have guys that you can call on and not necessarily know who that fifth starter is, before the season gets underway. It's not a bad place to be in.
And no matter who actually takes the 5 spot, do you think there's a sense in the front office of almost hoping whoever takes that spot is just keeping the seat warm for a Cade Horton, who it seems like that time is coming where he's been down there for a little bit? I feel like 2025, middle of the year, September at the latest, would be the hope for a guy like Cade Horton.
Well, hopefully, it's to have a injury setback. It's never what you want to see for anybody, especially when you're highly touted young prospects. So if Cade Horton is able to, find that secret sauce, mid-year, and be able to come up and add a jolt, a charge to this, whether it's the starting rotation, whether he comes in middle relief, but I feel like where he's at right now, he is a starter. But the one question I have with him being a converted position player is, how much of that starter DNA does he actually have? Because I feel like, Joe Girardi and I, we've had this conversation before. Like there's guys that play baseball. There's, just general baseball players who can play a whole assortment of positions, but there's really 2 positions that you're born into. Like most dudes who are starting pitchers are starting pitchers. And like I said, I had the conversation with Joe Girardi, and most catchers are catchers. I know we see a lot of dudes nowadays that are converted into the catching position, but for the most part, catchers are born. Like the real catchers, like Yadi Molina, guess what he was going to do when he was 2 years old? He was going to be a catcher. And I hate that I have to bring up a St. Louis Cardinals player, but that's just the fact of the matter. Those dudes who catch, that's what they do. And those cats who are starting pitchers, that's what they do. And we'll see, because it seems as if a guy like, that's a former third baseman, they fit the mold of being a closer more so than being a starter. So, I hope Cade Horton is able to fit right into that starting pitcher routine and that role, as opposed to being a dog as a reliever or a closer. But, we'll see. I mean, there's the road of a professional guy, of a professional player, is sometimes long and winding, and you never necessarily find your exact niche right away. So will he be able to find that spot? Hopefully. Will he be a lockdown starter? I hope so. But only time will tell. And as cliche as that sounds, that's all you can do is sit and wait with a prospect like that that's coming off an injury, because you don't necessarily know right away. So will he have to feel his way out a little bit before he potentially breaks in with a big club? Yes. How much time will it take? We're going to find out this season. I think that's going to be one of the fun things, because like we said, there's seven Cubs in the top 100. And once again, that's also a good problem to have. Cade Horton is one of those 7. So it's good news.
I think Steve is freezing up a little
bit. So the
bit here.
closer role remains an area of uncertainty. You mentioned it by name here, and spring training continues to progress.
Go ahead, Steve.
You guys got me now?
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. All right. So I'll take it. Steve will be back on here in a minute, hopefully. StreamYard every once in a while gives us a hard time.
It's all right.
But I know where he was going is the bullpen. You mentioned a bunch of those names. I just want to go back to that briefly. The pivotal role obviously is closer, but you mentioned all those close games they played last year, and it's not always just the 9th inning.
Come on, Steve. He's back.
I'm back.
So Steve, I was just going to the bullpen here, just kind of trying to clarify a little bit about the mixing and matching. Do you see this as Counsell as a guy who's going to want to lock down one specific closer, or all those names and those big dudes with velo that you mentioned before? Do you see him being okay with mixing and matching 7th, 8th, 9th inning, depending on the situation?
I hope he just goes with, I mean, if you have that dude, if Porter Hodge is that cat that's just going to come out and throw pellets, then cool. I mean, I feel like it also should depend on a little mixing and matching on velocity, because the name of the game is keeping hitters out front and off balance. Now, if you have a guy who starts the game and he's 93, 94, and whoever you bring in after him is 93, 94, then whoever's going to close the game out, maybe it's going to be Palencia, or maybe it's going to be Porter Hodge, or somebody who has a little more zip. And then a guy like Eli Morgan, he can come shut things down a little bit later. Then Ryan Presley, he can shut things down when someone comes in middle relief, say Ben Brown comes in, and he goes, 3 to 4 solid innings, he's throwing gas. Ryan Pressly does not throw as hard as Ben Brown. So I feel like it's all a game of adjustments. And, Craig being the chess master that he is, he'll be able to go out there and be able to put some of the pieces of the puzzle in winning situations. So when you look at some of these guys and their different arsenals, that's a luxury. Like, Ryan Pressly, to have a closer who doesn't necessarily close the way you would think a closer gets things done. He's not an Emmanuel Clase. He's not going to come in there throwing 101. And sometimes that's good. That's a good thing when you're able to keep guys out front and off balance, because then that keeps everyone else on their toes. And I feel like that if you're not able to hit your spots with that velo, then guys will just sit back and spit on it. And then it becomes a long inning. And then your walks start to pile up. And then errors start to accumulate. And then before you know it, you're losing another close ball game. So I just feel like the variance of guys that he has at his disposal to call on, whether it's a guy who throws hard or a cat who's able to keep you out front and off balance, that's going to be one thing that really determines the success of this bullpen this year. And I think that Craig has that.
So it depends on where people are at, but what do you subscribe to yourself, Cole? Do you believe that the experience in the big game for Pressly will bring a level of calmness for himself in that spot? Or do you think for some of these other players that I wouldn't say that they're too naive to realize the pressure? There's something to that. We've seen guys just succeed because they just go out there and they're not realizing the enormity of the moment. Sometimes a closer that's been in a position for quite some time, they know what they're stepping into. And some of the younger players just like, I'm happy to be out on the mound.
Well, I think as a failed closer, there's always the closers that were the failed starter. But I never wanted to be a starter when I played ball. It's like, why? You only get to play once a week. Like, I want to come out there, and if I get a chance to go out there and get after it, 2-3 times in a weekend in college, then yes, let's roll. If I don't get to swing the bat anymore, then let's get after it. So I think that closers, they realize the moment. I think that closers, though, there's just always something that's just a little bit off, where there's that fear of failure. Like, I'm going to go out here and guess I'm going to punch you in the face before you punch me in the face, because I'm afraid to get punched in the face. That's not because I think I'm tough or this, what, that, the other, figuratively speaking, but you just don't want to get got first. And that's how I feel like a lot of closers are. They go out there and it's like, yeah, I'm going to get you before you get me, Marshawn Lynch state of mind. So
Yeah.
I just think that if you are able to do that and kind of put everything in the back pocket and not worry about it, let's go out. I need to get 3 outs. However I get them, let's go. I mean, I feel like younger closers, they want to strike everybody out. Got guys with a little seasoning on them, like Ryan Pressly's like, I'll take the strikeouts, but guess what? I'll take 3 pitches, 3 ground balls, and let's get after it and get on the bus and get on the plane and go home. I think that's what a lot of guys like too, just smart baseball. And I think that's one thing that the Cubs will play this year. A lot of smart baseball, and winning games smart. It's a whole lot better than losing games dumb. So that's one thing that I think that we'll see a whole lot of this season.
I mean, let's go back to Pete Crow Armstrong just briefly here. I mean, we talk about winning close games and then having to turn that around. I mean, having him out there in center for a full season surely is going to help that situation, trying to track down some fly balls that maybe weren't caught last year at certain points of the season. So he's going to earn his paycheck out there in the outfield defensively most of the time, but the offensive side of the game is still a little bit incomplete for him. How do you think, or what adjustments do you think he needs to make to contribute to the offensive side of the ball more?
I just think he needs to put the ball in play, man, and get barrels. I mean, if I'm not mistaken, I think today he had 3 knocks. I think just being able to get barrels. He's still young, man. He's still so young. It's hitting's hard. It's so hard that it'll turn a hitter into a pitcher, and it'll get you out of the game of baseball before you know it. So, I think that what he brings defensively is always able to keep him grounded, because he is so good. When he does struggle a little bit with the bat, it's all right, because he can always go out there and know, I might not have gotten it done with the stick today, but I'm going to make a play. I'm going to always make a play. I mean, the way this dude, catches balls behind his back, and I mean, he's a center fielder who's an infielder at heart, and goes out there and can track down anything. It's almost, we did a demo the other day, a defensive demo that we had on the network. And it almost stinks sometimes that he does play at Wrigley, because you won't get to see him rob balls. I like to think he could probably jump up in the basket and rob one, but I mean, just the way he's able to run along the wall and make different plays that most guys won't be able to make. And I just think his defensive acumen is next level. So I think offensively, don't do too much, man. Your game is predicated on speed. Go out there, get knocks, get on base, steal, keep everyone on their toes and thinking, because he's a chaotic player, man. I know if I'm out there on the mound and he's not the Cubs leadoff hitter, Ian Happens, and he's done a fantastic job of that. But I feel like if the game slows down for Pete and you're able to put him in that leadoff spot and put Happer a little further down in the lineup, 3, 4, 5, somewhere around there, and mix him in because he's going to drive in runs and he's going to get on base. I feel like if I was out there pitching and Pete Armstrong was on first base to start a game off, you're like, this is exactly what I didn't want to happen.
Yeah,
because this dude's going to go and he's going to keep everyone on there, and he speeds everyone up. And when a player speeds everyone up, that's when errors happen, and that's when you can turn a ball that he should have been thrown out on at first. That now he's on third because they throw the ball into the dugout, right? Or close or down the line in right field, and now Pete's on third with no outs, and we're cooking. So then you got Kyle Tucker ready to drive him in, because I assume that's where things are at. But it's going to be Happer, and he's always going to be on base, which I guess sometimes one in the hand is better than two in the bush, but that's what you want from Pete. You want him to be able to take his offensive game to that next level, be able to get the on-base percentage up a little bit more, be able to mix in a few more hits. And I feel like if he's able to do that, then the power is going to come along. We've seen him in the minors be able to put a charge in a few. We even saw him last year. The power came along in the back half of the season. So getting a full campaign under his belt, that's going to be the best for the maturation and development process of Pete Armstrong.
On a lighter note, the hairstyle he came into spring training with, the bleach blonde with the blue stars.
Yep.
Give him a rating 1 to 10 on the hairstyle.
I'm going 10. That's my guy, man. Pete. I mean, he's the man. Like, you have to be confident to wear that. I mean,
that's true.
he has an old soul, man. Like, he's not a very flashy dude. Like, when you look at him, like, off the field, like, he's just a regular cat. Like, I feel like he almost looks like he just got back from a camping trip all the time. But he's like, he's the best dressed cat at the campground. But he's just a relaxed nature dude. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, he gets all this stuff from REI, of course, but I feel like he's not into like the jewelry and all the other stuff that some of the younger players might be into. He's got an old soul. He likes going out there and playing center field, man, and making plays. And I think that this is going to be his year.
So as far as the NL Central goes, it's shaping up to be fiercely competitive. We mentioned it by name before, but the Brewers always seem to get the best of their guys, no matter who just walked out the door. The Reds, of course, made several moves, none bigger than Terry Francona. How do you see the Cubs stacking up in this division race? And we mentioned it being wide open. Are the Cubs the favorite going in, according to Pacoda and according to you, Cole Wright?
I mean, I think they're the favorite. I mean, they're my favorite. I mean, clearly. I mean, I have to go out there and talk about them every single day. But I feel like that you pinpointed one of the biggest acquisitions. It's Terry Francona to the Reds. And, I worked in Boston when Terry was a skipper there. And, I just think that what he gets out of his players and, knowing guys that have played for him personally and, how great of a player's manager he is, I just think, he couldn't stay out of the game. Health concerns, push all that to the side. He's like, this is what I do. I'm a skipper. He's a baseball dude. I mean, obviously his dad was a baseball guy. He's a baseball guy. You can't keep him out of the game. So, you could probably pencil him in for 10 extra wins for Cincinnati just for him being on the bench. He's a problem. And, as soon as he was signed as a Cincinnati skipper, my producer and I, are now he's our senior vice president of live events at the network. I was messaging with him and I was like, this isn't great. Because Terry Francona is a solid baseball dude for sure. So you're going to get at least a few games stolen from you with that dude at the helm. So, I feel like Milwaukee, they continue to win, man. They're going to be a thorn. And Pat Murphy, I mean, he was on the bench with Craig Counsell almost the entire time there. I mean, it's his college skipper. Pat Murphy's been a winner in the past. So, I mean, if you want to take anything away from those guys, and then shame on you because they're. And if you look at Pittsburgh, I mean, I know they're the Pittsburgh Pirates, and the recent lack of success shouldn't necessarily dictate what the future will hold. But you look at those arms, Jones and Skeens, they've got some problems there, man. So it's not going to be a walk in the park by any stretch of the imagination. Like everyone's like, oh, it's anyone's division to win. Well, it could be, because all these teams are going to go out there and lace them up, man. They're going to be ready to roll. So I feel like with any kind of reinforcements that they brought in, I think everyone realized that every team in the division got better.
Just to touch upon Francona for a second, you mentioned what he brings to the field,
the
stuff on.
They didn't get much better. That's
who's that?
that never hurts to say that. The Cardinals didn't get a whole much better.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, we didn't even talk about the Cardinals at all. It's
Yeah.
weird that they've been
Right.
non-existent.
We don't need to talk about the Cardinals. That's fine.
But for Francona, I feel like he leaves franchises better than he found it. And on the field, of course, like we talk about what he brings to Boston, what he brought to Cleveland, and what he's now going to bring to Cincinnati. But you look at the shape of those franchises, and of course, front offices and everyone draft and analytics deserve credit for the scouting team. But it feels like there's a stabilization that he provides. Like he just left Cleveland in such a good shape following his exit. And like you watch what they did last year. I understand the AL Central was weak and they found a way to squeak in and all that. But he set the pace of we're gonna normalize success going forward. And I think he's gonna do that for the Reds.
Yeah, he's that dude. I feel like he's just that guy that you can talk to. He's a baseball cat. I mean, you could have a conversation with him, even if you're in line at the grocery store. Like he'll talk ball with pretty much anybody. I just feel like he's that constant. And I feel like wherever he lands, he's that calming force. And I feel like that's one thing that Cincinnati will be able to latch onto this year. You know, a lot of young dudes, a lot of young talent. And I feel like his baseball IQ is translatable to the younger generation. You know, some dudes might not work. You know, if you put Bobby Valentine as a skipper this day and age, players might not like him. You know, it's like you saw what happened with Tony La Russa, and there's a different age. I mean, I don't know what the age gap is between Terry Francona and Tony La Russa. I'm guessing it's considerable, but you know, they have more things in common than not. But I think that a guy like Tony La Russa was not translatable. I feel like it's my way or the highway. I think Tito recognizes that these young guys are different. Like the game is different. It's looked at through a completely different lens and scope. You know, it's like when Terry was playing, they didn't worry about OPS. Like walks were not valued as much. You know, it's could you win a batting title? Would you hit over 300? You know, can you drive runners in when the situation called for it? So I just think that his ability to compartmentalize the game in 2025 as opposed to 2010 or 2000 or 1980 for that matter. I think Terry Francona is one of those baseball dudes whose baseball knowledge just transcends the game. So I think, you know, Cincinnati, they got a winner, and hopefully they don't win too many games against the Cubs, but that's one thing that's for sure. They're going to win more games than they did a season ago.
So Terry's going to be 66 in April, and Tony La Russa is 80 right now. So you're dead on with there is a divide. 14 years, 15 years. Yeah, but still, the mindset's there. They're old school baseball guys, and Terry Francona has adapted. La Russa, not so much.
Sure.
Yeah, there's something to be said about adapting. It makes me think of, I'm a New York Giants fan as far as football goes. We had most of our success under Tom Coughlin, and for a couple years there, like he was rigid, that old school guy. And they finally started to succeed when he loosened up a little bit and realized like these players are not the same kind of people as I coached, say, 20 years ago. So I think Francona has that too. He adapts to his situation. I could see him being very successful. Seeing him and Ellie De La Cruz like together, I think that's going to be a fun dynamic for sure. To get back to the Cubs, if they find themselves where they want to find themselves around the trade deadline, at the top of the division or at least close enough and in playoff contention, do you expect Ricketts and Jed Hoyer to be aggressive at the deadline? And if so, if you look into your crystal ball right now, what do you think the need is going to be at that point?
I'm getting my crystal ball. I don't drop it because it's like a magic 8 ball.
I love it.
Bozo. It moves when there's light on it. It automatically moves. So
I love that.
Shout out to my wife and my mother-in-law for getting that for me for Christmas. But I think that if they're in position, we saw it 2 years ago going out and getting Jamer Candelario. I mean, that was huge. You needed to do that, and that's what it was. That was that big bat, you know, that could give you that extra punch. You know, it's unfortunate that Jamer wasn't able to stay around because I liked what he brought to the table. You know, he could switch hit. He, you know, it's just it's outside of the health. But yeah, I think that if they're in a position to strike and they could make some noise at the trade deadline, why not? Why not go get somebody? and make it happen. Now, whether or not it's going to be a dude like Dylan Cease. I know there's been a lot, on the trade market, say, the Cubs, they do have that currency, and that all goes back to that. How good of a season are some of your minor leaguers having at that point, and what do you need in order to make that last minute push, through August and September. So, if they're in a position, go get whoever you need to get to make this team better. So I don't think that anyone's opposed to that, whether it be, Jed Hoyer as the president of baseball operations, Carter Hawkins as the GM, or Tom Ricketts as the owner of the squad. I think that they want to put a winning team on the field, and, being able to go out there and win the division, that's first and foremost. And, if they don't see that in the cards by the trade deadline, then go and get that wild card, because at the end of the day, all you really need is that ticket to the game. Like, if you get a nosebleed seat, if you're slick enough, you can be in the front row by the end of the game. And that's all a wild card berth is. I mean, if you go out there and you handle business, you can find yourself in the World Series. I know we've seen that over the last few World Series outside of the last one, but you go back a few years ago, wild card teams making their presence felt. So we'll see.
So obviously, a big market like Chicago, there is an inherent pressure about taking the field in that capacity. If they do underperform, how much of a hot seat is Jed Hoyer, front office, managerial staff? Are they on, or is there a grace period for this year to see it all come to fruition?
I mean, that's once again, that's above my pay grade. I just feel as if the winning and making sure that everything lines up, that's the elixir that cures all, right? I mean, if you go out there and you win games, you don't have to worry about anything. If you go out there and take care of your job and do what needs to be done, and goes for all 30 teams, then everything will fall into place. So if the Cubs go out there and do what needs to be done, and they win ball games, they win the division, they have some postseason success, I don't think that necessarily this season a World Series is the end all be all. It's like, okay, you make the playoffs, you win one series, and then you get bounced. Okay, but we got a clean house. That's not the situation, because I know it's gradual, and you do ultimately want to be able to compete with a team like the Dodgers. So, I mean, they're the defending World Series champions. You have 2 to start the campaign in Japan against them, and then you're going to have some more in the front half of the season. So, and plus that whole the first few weeks of the season for the Cubs, they're going to be battle tested, man. You're going to take on some tough teams. You're going to see the Dodgers, you're going to see the Padres, you see the Diamondbacks. It's not going to be an easy road. So I feel like if they can go out there and win games, then everything will take care of itself. And I don't think there really should be any added pressure on any front office cat going into the season, because I feel like everything is always dependent on what's going on right now, unless you're the GM of a team that, like across town where things haven't been going. And then you're going to see a shift, and you're going to see why things haven't been going the right way. And you know why there's guys in new positions when teams set records for losing. And that's not the situation here. So I think a winning season, like we said, winning is the elixir that cures all. And I think winning right here could change a lot.
Let's step away from the current team just for a minute here. The Cubs finally welcomed Sammy Sosa back with open arms before spring training here. He was at the Cubs convention. He'll be inducted into the Cubs Hall of Fame, I guess, at some point during the season at Wrigley officially. Tom Ricketts was quoted as saying Sammy Sosa was not only one of the greatest home run hitters of all time, but he was a favorite of right field bleacher fans by sprinting out to right field to start each game. His defensive play was all-star caliber, in addition to his impressive all-time slugging stats. We're privileged to have him back at the Cubs convention so that we can celebrate with him. I said, finally, that's how I feel. Like, your thoughts on Sosa being welcomed back into the Cubs, I guess you could say, good graces.
I thought it was fantastic. And, lucky for me, I was the dude who got to introduce him. Like, the 17-year-old version of me, his head exploded, man. Like, when he first came out, there was another introduction, but I got to say when we did all the guys that were coming out, the Hall of Famers, and it was the second intro where he really got to just absorb it, when it wasn't just the Hall of Fame introduction. I mean, he was standing when I saw him come out the first time with the flag. We were both behind the backdrop on stage, and he was on one side and I was on the other, because as soon as he and D. Lee got introed, I had to come back out and start going through and introing the Hall of Famers, and then the Cubs Hall of Famers and everybody, the active roster. But to see him right across there and, kind of give me a thumbs up before they introed him and walk out, I was like, dude doesn't know me. I mean, I know he watches a lot of Cubs games, and maybe he watches the pre and post game show. But for him to give that thumbs up and then go out there and then get after, I was like, this is bananas. And to see the ovation and the eruption. I mean, the only thing that was bigger was when Ryan Sandberg stepped on stage, and rightfully so. I mean, but just to be, so I'm like a kid in a candy store. Like this is the team that I grew up cheering for, and this is the team that I get to go to and say I'm privileged enough to work for every single day. So to see these guys and to see Sammy Sosa back in the fold, like no one's ever hit 60 home runs in more than 2 seasons, except for Sammy Sosa. He's done it 3 times, man. Like his numbers over a 4-year span, 60 plus, 60 plus, 50, 60 plus. I mean, that's unbelievable when you think about the damage that he did. I mean, opposing pitchers must have had to be like, all right, I want no part of this dude at all. But they got every part of him, man. And I'll tell you, he was pretty good, man. He like Tom said, he was one of the best power hitters in the history of baseball. It's pretty crazy. Like I was able to get a picture of him, with my entire family, my wife and my daughter, and then my daughter and I got a picture with him, and she even got a picture with him with one of her friends before, and I didn't even realize it. But she plays softball, and she obviously didn't. She's only 13. She didn't get to watch any Sammy Sosa, but she's been able to watch him on YouTube, and especially since he's been welcomed back into the fold. I had her watching, and she's like, man, he has crazy opposite field pop. And I was like, yeah. I like the fact that she saw that. But when you look at a lot of Sammy Sosa's home runs, man, like he stayed on it, let it travel a little bit, and he got a lot up in those right center field bleachers, man. So he was delighting some of his fans out there back in the day, and I feel like he's delighting them once again being back with the team.
And I'm just glad that, the progressive thought pattern of these players from that era, the 1998 season, of course, in my opinion, saved baseball. I mean, we were 4 years removed from the lockout. What McGwire and Sosa did on that ride to summer, I remember vividly having VHS tapes that were being taped. My parents, obviously New York fans, Mets and Yankee fans, they were taping every McGwire and Sosa at bat, and we were watching them back because they know we were witnessing history. So what Sosa brought to the table, seeing him welcome back and being honored, because at the end of the day, he brought so much to that season. Even though he finished behind McGwire in the home run race, he was essential to getting people liking baseball again. And kudos to him. And I enjoyed watching him as a kid. He was an absolute monster at the plate.
Yeah, for what Mark McGwire and Sammy Sosa did, I mean, I know that there was some shrouds of suspicion there, if that's how we want to put it. But I mean, and even when you look at Cooperstown, when certain guys get in, some guys, I mean, they're not guilty. I mean, there's still some speculation there. So I don't know. I'm not mad at the guys that supposedly did or didn't. It is what it is. I just know that I was provided a lot of really good baseball to watch, and whether some guys did do certain things that tarnished their legacy for a small window of time. That is what it is, man. I wasn't in that clubhouse with them, and all I know is what they did on the field, and what I saw Sammy Sosa and Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens and all those guys do was pretty remarkable, man. Alex Rodriguez, for that matter. I mean, I know you might not like him, but one thing you can't take away from him is, man, he'll rip your ears off your head if he's in that batter's box.
Yeah, and context is king too. I mean, we look at all the errors of baseball, and you got to consider, like, the other guy throwing the ball at Sammy or Alex Rodriguez or Barry Bonds probably was doing equal parts. So we have to just put that all in, and we can't villainize one error.
Like Gagne, everyone says, you look at Eric Gagne. I mean, look at the save numbers he was able to throw up. It just made for and I'm not condoning saying, all right, maybe we should get guys back on this again. It was a great style, but it was some pretty sweet baseball. I mean, you look at I made reference to the 1999 All-Star game. I don't know how many guys were clean, how many guys weren't, but who cares? I mean, I'm not baseball's moral police. I'm just here to watch. I'm here to watch games and watch dudes mash and watch cats throw bullets out there, man. And when the governing body says, okay, we might have a good idea of this. I mean, obviously things have changed over the years, but I mean, you can't blame those guys, man. I mean, that was a personal decision that they made, so I'm not mad at them. I mean, it was essentially they were kind of allowed to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say the same thing. They condoned it, if not encouraged to do it, because if not for what we saw, who knows where baseball would be? And that is sort of the villainization of the era. I always hate to see, because I was a fan. I grew up. That was me as a 9-year-old in 1998. That cemented my baseball fan. Of course, the Yankees winning all the World Series they did throughout those years certainly helped, but that was part of the baseball was magic, man. When those guys came to the plate, they were larger than life. And, we're approaching that again. I feel like bringing it back 2025, there's a lot of star power out there that we can be proud of, and they're doing it the right way, but they're also electric. And you mentioned Pete Crow Armstrong. He's just one example of bringing your personality to the game. And I love it.
Yeah. And I was talking with my daughter about, just the whole steroid thing. And I said, like, the way I explained it to her about the guys that are, on the outs with baseball, I said, it'd be like someone gave them the answers to a test and said, hey man, like, go ahead, go get A's on this test. It's going to make everybody look better. And then, like, look at that. They got an A on his test. Like, he's fantastic, great student. And then a few years down the road, like, oh, he was cheating. Well, yeah. I don't know why he was cheating. That's terrible. Like, we're never going to put him in the, notable alumni. It's like, that's the same thing they do with these guys who put up crazy numbers. Like, they knew that people were cheating and it was okay. But when it was all said and done with, it's like, oh, they tried to make them, like you said, like the villainization of some of these guys. Like, hold on a second, man. Like, that's not cool. Like, you can't do that. If some of the cats that knew what was going on, if nothing but a slap on the wrist for them, it's not cool. And it's not right for some guys who clearly tested positive to get in first ballot.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And while you have some of the game's greats who put up a resume of, a guy like Barry Bonds, 500 before there was any steroid speculation.
Yep.
So, I feel like we could have a whole conversation on this on its own. But that's, like I said, another conversation for another day. But, you would hope that, that some guys eventually will get in. You hope that they don't get in before they leave us. We saw that with Pete Rose.
Right.
Did he do everything the right way? No. But, I don't know if you've seen the Rose documentary. All he said is he went out there and he tried to play. He loved baseball. And I worked with Pete Rose when I worked at Fox, and I was able to sit in the green room and just share. Pete Rose was telling me stories about baseball. Like, because one of my buddies who now produces for Apple TV, and we both played in the Frontier League. And so for Pete Rose, a guy fouled out one day, and it was my buddy, myself, and Pete Rose sitting there watching a baseball game. And a dude fouls out like right on the first base line, and Pete's like, what is that? And we were like, he fouled out. He's like, I went a whole season without fouling out. And we were like, and then he said, I also went a whole season using the same bat in batting practice and in games. Now, I don't know if any of those stories are true. Rest in peace, Pete Rose. But when the dude that has more hits than anybody that's ever played the game of baseball is telling you this, you believe him. Right. So I didn't do any research. I didn't go check and see if Pete Rose had any foul outs in any season. But, was able just to be able to sit there and be a fly on the wall and have Pete Rose tell you baseball stories, whether or not he's in the Hall of Fame or not. Like, he's a Hall of Famer in my book, man. And, I know I'll always be able to have those stories, and they're pretty cool.
Yeah, the time we got him on Fox during the postseason for those years, it's wonderful. And you mentioned him not being in Cooperstown, but his fingerprints are all over around it. They're selling Pete Rose merchandise. How many of his artifacts are there as well? So by proxy, he's a Hall of Famer and one of the greatest hitters we'll ever see. So RIP, rest easy to Pete Rose.
Absolutely. Such a gamer.
So Cole, you gave us a lot of time here tonight, and we really appreciate that. To close on a more reflective note, let's turn to a broader context of Chicago sports. I know you're a Chicago kid. Mm-hmm. If you had to recreate a Chicago sports Mount Rushmore, this is a segment we've been doing. I'm trying to put a flair for all our guests. Which four figures would you select as the most influential from your eyes? It doesn't have to be the de facto as far as your fandom goes, like just as an opinion question as much as anything, your Chicago sports Mount Rushmore.
Man, I would love to go back in the day and put some of the old school cats on it. But I feel like you have to, Michael Jordan obviously he could take up all four spots if need be. But I would love to say Ernie Banks. Okay. However, I never met Ernie Banks. And I just feel like as far as influential as to me, the conversations I've been able to have with Billy Williams and Fergie Jenkins, two Hall of Famers in their own right. And I feel like it's an unfair question for me. Like, can I put, Michael Jordan, Fergie, Billy, and Rhino all on it?
Absolutely.
This is four.
Completely subjective to who you want it to be.
Right. But then I feel like then that leaves Andre Dawson off, and Andre Dawson was my first favorite player. And I got the first time I was able to pick a number, it was number 8. But I feel like Hawk didn't play for the Cubs for long enough, even though he's clearly a Cubs Hall of Famer and a Hall of Famer in his own right. I just feel like the other guys were, pretty much were lifers. I mean, Fergie played for the Phillies and played for the Rangers as well, but Billy on the A's. But the bulk of their career was spent as a Chicago Cub. So I got to go Rhino, Billy, Fergie, and Michael Jordan, man. And I know that there's, I'm leaving Bears off. I'm leaving other Bulls off. Scottie Pippen. He's looking up there, probably telling some weird stories about how LeBron's better than Mike. But either way, those are my guys. So I feel very blessed and privileged that I've been able to come in contact with them, and I was able to host Ryan Sandberg's statue unveiling. I don't know why he picked me, still don't, but it's crazy. Every time I'm around, I was just around, at spring training, I was down the line with Rhino and Sut, just telling stories, and the fact that those guys will tell stories and welcome me in as somewhat of a baseball peer, and they'll ask my baseball opinion. Like that's mind blowing. I sat with Fergie just on either Wednesday or Tuesday and we talked pitching for about a half an hour. I mean, that's nuts. Like the 13-year-old version, the 20-year-old version, the 30-year-old version of me would still find that fascinating. So I never take that for granted. And, any time that I'm able to pick the brain of these guys and just find out more about the game, it's unbelievable. Billy Williams told me a story one time. It was probably about 2 spring trainings ago, where he and his brother one summer they barnstormed with Satchel Paige. And when they were done, Satchel Paige gave them each $5 and paid for their bus ticket. I'm like, that's the craziest story ever. And then he followed that up with saying that before spring training in Birmingham, all the pros, all the dudes that lived in the Birmingham area used to go to a field and take BP. They'd throw BP to each other. It'd be Billy Williams, Willie Mays, Willie McCovey, all these cats. And I'm like, Hank Aaron and his brother. And I'm like, and Tommy Aaron. It's like, yo. What? Can you imagine being a kid back in the day, driving your bike by the field? Like, there's no internet. There's none of that. And all these dudes who you have baseball cards of, you see taking BP with no L screen at the local park. And then Billy said, like, yeah, we did it with no L screen. And then he looked at me and he said, don't you think we wear that shift out? This is back before they outlawed the shift. So, being able to hit with a purpose and being able to, acknowledge counts. I feel like that's something that you don't see as much in baseball. I feel like those hitters that were professional hitters, Billy Williams, the only left-handed hitter as a Chicago Cub to go 40 pumps or more. I mean, you got to think that's the equipment was a lot different. And believe me, even right now, I'm a lot bigger than Billy Williams ever was. And in batting practice, all I ever do is bang balls off the ivy, man. So for him to be able to get it up and out, he was definitely a special hitter, and to be able to pick those guys' brains, like it's pretty cool.
Cole, I gotta ask a bonus question here. One thing you don't know, and if you knew this, you might not have agreed to come on the show. Steve's a Packer fan, even though he's a New Yorker. So as a Chicago guy, new coach, Caleb Williams going to his second year, do you feel confident enough to tell Steve that you guys are going to take down the Packers this year twice?
I mean, the numbers don't look great against the Packers over the last decade or so. So I'm not going to put my foot in my mouth like that. And for not for nothing, I mean, Caleb Williams, he wants to take that next step, and with Ben Johnson, but Ben Johnson doesn't have any head coaching experience. I hope he's fantastic as a head coach, but there has to be that grace period. And you saw it with Matt LaFleur. I mean, you saw it with Nick Sirianni. I mean, we've seen it with Zach Taylor. We've seen it with all these new head coaches around the league who have been implemented. We saw it with Sean McVay when he first got on with the team. I mean, there's always going to be a grace period, especially with the offensive dudes. Like it takes a little bit of time to implement that game plan. So we'll see. I mean, I think that Caleb Williams has everything that it could take to be that franchise kind of dude. I mean, his numbers this year, they were good. They weren't Jaden Daniels good. But then again, he had a whole different situation in Washington than Caleb did in Chicago. The offensive line, that's where it starts. So the fortification, that's going to begin at the combine, man. It's right around the corner. So Bears, you'll be on the clock here pretty soon. Big expectations. Steve, I'm sorry that you have to deal with being a Packers fan. Unfortunate, but at least you like baseball.
I've been a Packers fan since the mid-'90s. Of course, Brett Favre was my guy, and I I didn't never subscribed, never fell in love with the Giants or the Jets, and was always a Packer fan. And I sat through some tough years, but for the most part, they've had a pretty consistent run. There was a few years in between, but to go from Favre to Rodgers to Love, I mean, the quarterback
Yeah, give me a break.
I'm sorry. Did the Giants? We saw Cole kind of just gasp a little bit when you said you're a Giants fan. I mean, it's rough over there in New York Giants land.
Yeah, man. Most franchises, when you lose your franchise guy, you can't find another dude for like 10 years minimum, it seems. There's a couple lucky franchises. The Packers are one.
But is it luck or is it infrastructure that creates
like the Steelers and head coaches? And I know there's a lot of Steelers fans that'll be like, "Oh, Mike Tomlin, we got to get him out of here." Like, take it easy. Because there's a lot of other teams that have been through coaching carousels. It seems like every 3 or 4 years, and it's not fun to do. And when you have a dude who's had a winning season or at least 500 or better for 17 years in a row, like, careful what you wish for. So
exactly.
I mean,
if you're not a fan of other teams, they know. So
Devin mentioned before too, the Giant fans in New York were pushing Coughlin out the door. Like, I think they would welcome him back if we can make him 10 years younger. They'd be like, "We'll take Coughlin back."
Yeah, and look, he went down to Jacksonville and had them balling. He had them in the AFC Championship game with Blake Bortles and those cats out there. And Calais Campbell and all those dudes, man. They were a team. They were forced to be reckoned with for a small, even though it was a small window. I'm not going into Blake Bortles and the Jacksonville Jaguars talk, but I mean he had that team on a winning trajectory. So
you guys can follow Cole at Cole Wright on X as well, and you can also see him pre and post game Marquee Sports Network in the studio, talking all things about the Cubs on Cubs Live. I'll give you the platform here. Just hype up some things you have going forward outside of the things we talked about tonight.
I mean, just the season. That's what I have going on right now, man. I pretty much focus all my efforts on Chicago Cubs baseball, and when it's not the Bears season, that's what we're locked in on. Outside of that, my daughter's got two tournaments in College Station, Texas, to get the campaign underway. But I'll be doing some traveling before the season in Japan gets started, and once I just got my schedule the other day, 144 games. I'm locked in, so we'll be ready to roll, man.
So again, make sure you guys follow Cole at Cole Wright for all the updates here, and check him out on Marquee Sports Network. We thank you so much for hopping on with us. We'll be back in 1 second with our final wrap up. All right. Once again, I want to thank Cole Wright for joining us here, talking all things Chicago Cubs, previewing the season. We got some Sammy Sosa talk in there. We got some Bears talk at the end, talking about Green Bay Packers and the rivalry and what we're going to expect from Caleb Williams. What a guest, dude. And again, you guys can check him out at the Marquee Sports Network. Bringing all the noise, man. Very, very knowledgeable dude, talking about the Chicago Cubs and all things baseball. It was awesome.
Yeah, man. I mean, and we even snuck in some Jacksonville Jaguars Blake Bortles talk. Who knew that was going to come in there? But the Cubs are going to be front and center this year, man. I mean, they're starting the season off with the Dodgers, obviously. And I like what he had to say. Like, he brings up some good points about how he really feels like this team is going to play the game the right way. They're going to be annoying to play against. They have these gold glovers in some spots, especially the outfield. And the point he made, and that maybe I didn't exactly realize before this interview, was just how many close games they lost last year. And he made the good point. You just turn like less than half of those around and you're easily a playoff team. So the additions they've made, you got to be excited as a Cub fan. Even if you were left wanting a little more with the Bregman stuff and feeling like they could have been a little more aggressive there at the end to complete the puzzle, you still have to be excited about going into this season as a Cub fan.
No, I completely agree with that. And a big conversation about where the Cubs are going to be. Like you said, they have tough matchups from the jump here. We're going to assess who they are. It's a long season, but we'll get a flavor for who the Cubs are. And I think they have a good way. I mean, if they come out swinging and take 2 from the Dodgers in Japan, and everyone will make the excuses for the Dodgers and say the travel, etc. But if the Cubs make a statement over there on a showcase spot to open the season, I think it would be showing people that the Cubs are here to stay. I'm excited for it.
Yeah, the beginning of the season is kind of one of those weird things, and I'm sure we'll continue to talk about it, and I'll probably repeat myself a couple times as the season gets closer. But what I learned last year, and over many years as a baseball fan, but especially last year, maybe because we were doing this show, is that March and April especially, a bad start is not necessarily the end of the world. I mean, you look at Yamamoto's first start, and then he bounced back. You look at the Mets starting 0-5, looking lifeless. I was calling them a bunch of Eeyores for about a month or two when we started this show. And you look where they ended up. You can bounce back from a bad couple or a bad beginning of the season. But on the other side of the coin, a hot start to the season you can live off of that for a little while. Like that can set the tone for the rest of the year. So I agree with you. If the Cubs can come out here in the beginning of the season and set that tone and get hot early in a division that, as we've said through this interview, is winnable for a few teams there, they could live off that for a little while and they could kind of get going.
So at the risk of this getting lost in the conversation, the Yankees made some headlines on Friday and then even today where they got rid of their facial hair policy. And they're also, this was not confirmed yet by the Yankees, but during spring training, they lost the game and they're no longer playing New York, New York by Frank Sinatra after losses. They played That's Life. And apparently they're going to be playing a plethora of Frank Sinatra games following losses. And all I can say is finally. For, a lot of the New York radio was talking about the policies for facial hair and how antiquated they are and how guys can have beards within reason now for the team. To have them not play in New York after a loss is fantastic to me. It was a layup to play That's Life. It just talks about it, like you lost, but that's life. And it's still Sinatra's pearly vocal cords ringing out through the Bronx. Like, I don't know. It was pretty eventful outside of the walls of baseball. And they had a press conference for the facial hair stuff, which people were mocking, but I mean, it is a big deal in Yankee land. If people aren't from here, you don't understand. Like, this is a really big deal. The Yankees are going to be allowed to have facial hair going forward. That's not just the Don Mattingly, Thurman Munson mustache. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I found the whole thing a little bit funny because there's, so many different reactions. I was surprised at actually how many Yankee fans voiced their displeasure. There was actually a strong contingent of fans that didn't like the facial hair change and said, oh, when you get rid of these things, you just become like any other franchise. And like, all right, we're already not,
it's lowering your bar and your expectations. That's what people were saying.
Yeah. But then again, Boone and a few others made a good point. Like, we never want to take ourselves out of the running for a player for a policy that might turn them off. And that might sound silly, but Devin Williams apparently went and told either Cashman or Steinbrenner that he wasn't exactly pleased with the whole facial hair thing or something along those lines, which I don't think was the only thing that led to this, but might have been the final straw and someone actually voicing their displeasure. And then Judge on the other side of the coin said, listen, man, if there's like anybody who didn't want to come here because of a silly little policy like this, they shouldn't be on the team in the first place. And I love that attitude as, like the captain, the face of the team. I love that. But yeah, I think it was time, probably overdue. The That's Life thing was super obvious. That thing, to me, that just became a big thing last year. But I'm not a Yankee fan, so maybe people have been talking about that forever.
I've been saying it. It started to get momentum, but like in my close circle of Yankee fans, like we always said the same thing. Like, why are you playing the same song?
Yeah,
New York should be after a win.
Right. Yeah, and then of course there's the other contingent of fans, like non-Yankee fans, the Yankee haters saying like, "Oh, man, they lose Juan Soto and they lose their mind and have to change all their policies. They're reaching."
Is that you saying that, Devin? Devin, are you saying that?
It's not me saying it.
Okay,
I'm just saying people are saying it. It's not. I mean, I haven't tweeted it out. I might have read a tweet or two or three or 10.
You might have had a quiet thought. You might have had a quiet thought and a quiet moment.
Accidentally clicked the heart, but it was accident. I unclicked it really quickly.
Well, it's okay, Devin. We're going to have some really exciting baseball to watch with the Yankees and the Mets going forward. And when Juan Soto takes his first at bat at Yankee Stadium wearing that orange and blue, it's good for baseball. It's going to be exciting. People are going to be booing and cheering and locked onto the screen. And that's all we can ask for.
Let's go, man. Let's get baseball on our screens as quickly as possible.
So if you guys are watching this on video, of course, you guys see that the Dugout Mugs is there. But if you guys are looking to support the show, of course, you can follow us at Tablesetters Pod on X and also on Instagram. But go to Dugout Mugs, grab yourself one of those amazing barrel glasses that they bring to the table with your favorite team on there and use code TS10 to save 10% on your order. A lot of great stuff. They were nice enough to send over a Mets one and a Yankees one to us. They also have bottle openers, which is like a half baseball. For any team that you're interested in rooting for, they have all the equity over there for you to check. And Doug.
Yeah, man, and hopefully get some more partnerships going on here, something we're going to look into. But yeah, nice way to support us. Also on YouTube, man, if you guys are watching on YouTube, last week, man, our episodes, we did great with Jared Sandler for the Texas Rangers and then Coach Mams for Delaware. Really one of our best weeks ever as far as views and clicks and all that stuff and likes and new followers. Do us a favor, though, if you're watching on YouTube, even just every once in a while, subscribe, because the listening numbers and the views numbers went way up this last week. The subscription numbers, not as much as maybe we'd like. And that really helps us in addition to leaving reviews and things like that. So do us a favor and subscribe everywhere you can.
So outside of that eventual steroid episode that we do with Cole Wright talking about the 1998 season and whatever, that has me intrigued about potentially doing something like that in the off season or things like that. Devin and I will be constructing a schedule for some season previews with divisions in mind. So from what we understand, and again, we'll have more details for you as we bring it to the table. We're going to be dropping some of the division previews at once. So potentially, you know, for example, we'll do the AL East and the NL East, and we will have previews split in half, dropping the episode both in the same day, but as separate episodes, because you guys can neatly consume them and none of it gets lost in the shuffle. We have to hold ourselves accountable and only go 30 minutes per episode. So it's digestible, get you guys caught up. If you happen to be slumbering during the off season, you know, you just want a quick touch base on what the season has for your division specifically. It will be all packed into that episode for your division. So click on it, check it out, engage with us, and let us know what you think about our predictions.
Yeah, so most likely we'll be back early next week. So this might be the only one for this week. And then our next regular episode with no guest, we are probably actually going to spend that episode talking about our own fantasy league draft. So another kind of fantasy shaped episode, but reflecting on the draft of our actual league. And we'll explain more when we get to that episode, because our league is unique in some ways, which we're going to have to make sure everybody understands. And then after that, the division previews will start, as Steve said. And as far as guests, that's fluid. Like, we are looking for that all the time. Sometimes they happen quickly. So there could absolutely be some guest episodes in that mix in the next few weeks, in addition to the division previews. But you have that to look forward to.
Yeah, I sent some canvassing emails out to some colleges as well, some specific people. I got some contacts from their sites. I'm looking to get an eclectic array of guests, not just players and coaches, but looking for those that are in charge of analytics and pitching labs and those that are studying the arm angles. I would love to bring maybe a physician's perspective on pitching and that whole thing. So I did reach out to some, no promises, of course, but got a lot of irons in the fire trying to figure out who else to have on the show, because we want to bring you guys the best content for all things baseball, not just conversation about who we like and, you know, who played well the night before. We want to bring you guys pretty much a diverse amount of voices on here that have different opinions, different backgrounds, and different walks of life, and bring a different angle to what we all love. And that's baseball all the time. Love it.
Yeah. Was it Sammy Sosa who said baseball has been very, very good to me? Was that him?
I think it was. Yeah.
That? Okay. Well, if I'm wrong, I apologize.
I mean, baseball has been good to Sammy Sosa. Let's be honest. Yeah,
I mean, not for a few years, but anyway, we're getting off the rails here.
All right, well, we appreciate you guys listening to us again. If you want to support the show, please leave a 5-star review, Spotify or Apple. If you want to go out of your way, do a written review. Say why you love the show. Say Steve and Devin always bring the hot takes on there and have a great conversation. But also support us by following us on X. Devin's doing a good job posting highlights and engaging college stuff, but also MLB. All the great content over there. Devin's responsible for bringing it to the table. It's been great conversations on there. And, of course, on Instagram as well. If you guys consume media that way, we'll be posting reels over there. You guys can follow us on there and share it with your friends. But we'll be back next week talking all things Major League Baseball and beyond. We'll talk to you after a while.
High fly ball into right field. She is gone. In a year that has been so improbable, the impossible